Welcome to the podcast of the impossible. I'm Peter Wood, and my guest today is 50% fake psychic, 50% mentalist, 50% mind reader, and 100% better at math than I am. It is Brian Curry. I made that up just for you.
That was fabulous. I loved it. I'm going to hand that to people for my intro now.
So I did want to talk about the fake psychic thing because I think that's a cool, I love that angle. And the only thing sort of a brief continuation of our topic from the last time we chatted. I'm curious about, do you worry at all about ruffling any feathers? I know that you don't want to have people leaving your show believing something that you don't want to give people the idea of something that you know to believe to be false. But how much do you feel is your responsibility to let people know that most, or I believe our skeptical minds would say that all psychics are faking it, versus are you more just wanting to frame yourself as fake and then doing less of the James Randi sort of stuff? So where do you sort of see yourself in that continuum?
That is an excellent question. I will, this does not happen often because
Okay.
I think my show is clear at the end what I believe. However, I remember one woman in particular who came up with her family and, we love the show and this and that and the other thing. She goes, however, I went to a psychic once and they told me, and I talked to my father and he mentioned my blah, blah, blah. I don't remember what it was, but like some detail. It's just, well, then how did she know that?
Yeah.
And it was one of those gauntlet throwdown moments. And I'm like, I don't know. I go, it's just not my job. If someone wants to believe it, they can believe it.
Yeah.
I think my job is not to make them any dumber.
Yeah.
If they want to believe it, that's fine. I have no problem with people believing it. I just don't want them to take what I'm doing as a C. I had a good friend who came to see, she's very, very smart and she paid for psychic. She was paying about $400 an hour to talk to a psychic. And luckily she was rich, so it was okay. But I brought her to see Doc Hilford, who is one of my friends and one of the best mind readers out there. And he, as we discussed in a previous episode, he has a disclaimer at the beginning. You believe basically what you want. You come in believing something, and his show, you leave believing the same thing. And that's great. And that works for him. But in the middle of his show, after doing something where he said some things he could never possibly know, she turns around because I was sitting behind her. She goes, "See, I told you it was real." And it was just like, oh no, he's the guy who teaches me how to pretend to be a real. Like it's just, I don't want people leaving my show, but some people come. I met one girl came with her parents. She looked young. She was probably, she had to be a teenager, but maybe a late teenager. And as we're walking out, I brought her up and taught her how to be a fake psychic, and she pretended to read somebody's mind. That's one of the routines of my show. And afterwards, her parents come up and she goes, "Oh, by the way, here's her card." And the little girl, the teenager, was a psychic, like for hire. Like the card was psychic reader.
Okay.
And which was funny because I brought her up to teach her how to be a fake psychic. I mean, I'm not, but I think a lot of people believe, a lot of psychics believe they're drinking their own Kool-Aid, right?
Yeah.
I think some psychics feel like they have this intuition that is right. And I don't think they're all intentionally trying to trick people.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, I tend to think about it, but I think a lot of people actually believe what they're saying.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was sort of the more I've gotten into, knowing about mentalism, but also just sort of studying the related arts and fields in general. I sort of always thought about somebody as either, using no trickery or using trickery and being fully aware that we're using trick. Like I'm stealing money from these stupid people. Ha ha ha. I'm going to tell them that I'm a psychic, but I know for sure I'm not, Right. And just like everything in life, it's not nearly as black and white as that. There's a lot more gray nuance where it never occurred to me when I would think about this probably a decade ago, the idea of somebody who believes they have a power and they believe that it's their responsibility to share it with people. But sometimes the spirits need some help. So I have to do a trick or two to
Yeah.
sort of prime the pump and get things going. And like that to me crosses into the line of a magic show. But I guess there's a mindset where you can kind of do that and
Right.
not have it feel as icky as it would make you and I feel if we were doing that.
Exactly.
Well, and so you mentioned Doc Hilford. Who are some other, like when you think back to magic shows and magicians that you've seen who either inspired you in a good way or, without naming names, are there any experiences you recall that were like, well, definitely not doing that,
Oh yeah.
what comes to mind?
So many of those.
More
The
in the
first
latter,
person
right?
I'll name is somebody you've never heard of. And I'll tell you the story. It was a Cox Farm. We talked about Cox Farms in my last show.
Yep.
The week before my first walk around thing at Cox Farms, I went there with my mom to check it out, just to be, because I'd never even been to the farm.
Cool.
So we went, and there was a magician named Al Curlett performing on the stage.
Okay.
And we watched his show, and my mom and I sat there after the show. It was like an hour between shows or whatever, talking. We spent the whole time talking about his show. And a lot of it, and this is, I clearly get this from my parents, it was analyzing the show. Like, hey, did you notice how he was interacting? And he constantly had the kids saying things, and he was having them do things. He had them play with those little rubber bands and the da-da-da-da-da. It was just like an analysis of why he was so good.
Right.
And we watched him 4 times in a row, back to back. We didn't even get up. I think we got up once to get some food. And after the 4th time, Al walks up to us and he goes, okay, what's the deal? You must have my show number.
Right.
And I'm like, well, Brian loves magic and he wants to be a magician, and we've just been watching you and trying to learn because you're so good with your audience and da 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 da. And Al, without even he just mid-sentence, he just turned around, walked up, he went behind his Leffler table, magic podium table, and he went out and he brought out 2 of the routines from the show, and he walked them over and he taught me those routines.
Wow.
Just, these are not like, oh, here's some easy magic that you can. No, this is his act. He's getting paid, I thought, amazing money at the time to get to do this.
Yeah.
And he literally taught me, and he had finished his last show. So he's like, here, just have these. I got more of them at home. And he gave me a plastic bag, Ziploc bag that was sneaky, and some apple balloons so that I could do his apple trick. And that had such a big impact on me. If he had taught me terrible, crappy tricks, if he had spent the whole time teaching me how to take off my thumb, I never would have, that would have been it. I would have been like, yeah, well, I don't really want to do stage magic. But he tried to teach me the good stuff, the things that he thought were really important. Yeah. And he's to this day, he's one of my best friends. But that is one of those shows that just changed me, was getting to hang out with Al and his giving spirit. And so when anyone asks me for help, I try to always say yes, just because I always think about Al and how he did that. I'm not necessarily going to teach my act the way he did, but I'll certainly try to teach only good stuff. Denny, same way. Denny wouldn't sell you something if he thought it was bad. Yeah. And so I was lucky to be surrounded by guys like that.
Well, so it's just for the uninitiated, real quick, Denny Haney was a legendary performer, performed all over the country and international things as well. And he owned a magic shop, Denny and Lee Magic Studio, in Baltimore for decades. And so he was definitely an institution, not just the place where the local magicians would come, but then when people were touring or were coming through the Baltimore area, it was a hangout spot. And I know he was
Copperfield. Copperfield stopped by one time. I mean, that's the caliber of guys that would just. Denny was one of the most influential people in my. So you're talking about guys who influenced me. Denny, his show, he was the first illusionist that I thought was actually funny.
Okay.
Right. Copperfield is great, right? Copperfield tells beautiful stories and he does illusions. He's kind of in his own camp. Yeah. But as far as the rest of us, most illusionists are kind of, it's not my cup of tea. Not that I don't like it, and I'm usually amazed by it and stuff, but he's the first one that I was really, really funny.
Right.
Laugh out loud the entire time while doing illusions.
Sure.
So that was a big thing. As far as shows, Darren Brown.
Sure.
I mean, any mentalist today probably has been influenced by Darren Brown. And I only saw his show live when he was in New York. I didn't get a chance to see him. You know, I saw luckily he put his stuff out on YouTube.
Mhm.
And so you can go, if you go to YouTube, if you've never heard of Darren Brown, go to Darren, just Google Darren Brown and his theater shows. His TV stuff is great too, but his theater shows are just spectacular.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Other shows that influenced me, Boy in and of itself was great.
Derek Delgadio up in New York again.
Derek Delgadio's in and of itself shows. It was, you know, this is gonna sound cheesy, but Penn and Teller. Here's how they're the first magicians I remember that had an opinion. Copperfield told good stories.
Right.
Penn and Teller were there on a mission, right? They were angry about stuff. And
right.
they wanted to, they had a political view. They wanted to talk about burning the Bill of Rights and the flag and the thing. And like, right. Even if I didn't agree with everything they said, I loved that they had something to say. It wasn't, let me fool you and let me make you, you know, it was like they had a mission in life. And I found, and when I do my live show, my public show, that's something I think about a lot. When you do a corporate gig or for hire gig, people at our level, we don't necessarily people don't pay us for our opinions. They pay us to come in and entertain and make people happy.
Sure.
So, but at my live show, I can do whatever I want. It's my show. They're buying tickets to see what I have to say. So I can have an opinion. And that was huge. Gosh, other guys, what's his name? Mark Halen and Ginger. They had I think it's Magic Circus,
Carnival of Wonders.
That was it.
Yes. Oh, God, yes. That was a great show.
A good show.
Yeah.
Every aspect of it was good. Jeff Hobson was in it.
Yep.
And they were in it. And it was just like, all of it was so beautifully done.
Yeah.
Like, I just remember leaving that show thinking it was one of the most perfect shows I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
There's been lots of guys. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name now. He lives in Hawaii now.
Paul Kozak.
Kozak. See,
I'm the mind reader right here.
You are the mind reader. Thank goodness you're here to translate. When I saw videos of Kozak, I never really loved him, and there was something about him. He was a little too Vegas-y. The voice he used was a little. It didn't feel real to me. But he put out great magic, and you know, everyone hailed him as a great comedy magician. So I went to go see him, and what I just didn't understand, what I didn't get from the little clips, is that he is so consistent in his persona that I totally bought into it. Like at the beginning, you know, he comes out with, "Hey, how's it going, Kozak?" You know, he's doing his things, and I'm like, "Oh, this is so silly." By the end, I'm shouting Kozak. It was so his frame, so to speak, his frame of this larger than life character.
Sure.
Was so consistent that and I thought that was an interesting lesson in and of itself. Oh, I can't forget this one. Stephen Bargatze.
Oh yeah.
I had never heard of Stephen Bargatze until Bob Sheets. I had a restaurant gig, Magic of New Orleans, and Bob goes, "Hey, Stephen Bargatze's in town. He's doing a high school in Fairfax. I told him you're going to go." I go, "I got a restaurant gig," and he goes, "Oh, F your restaurant. Go find one of your guys to fill in for you. I told him you're coming. I'll send you the address." And so I found a sub, and at the time, you know, I was right out of college and I was young, and I was like, that's 100 whatever it was, $150 that I needed, but okay, fine, I'm gonna go see Steven. So I go, and he's at a high school, and I meet him beforehand, and he's really super nice. And as kids are walking in, I'm kind of off on the side in this high school auditorium. As they're walking in, I hear the kids going, "Ooh, a magic show." They're making fun, which I get. All right, we know where we are on the totem pole of entertainment.
Sure.
So Steven comes out, and he goes to this group of kids, and I can't even see what he's doing, but all of a sudden they're all standing up around him, and he's got a crowd, a full circle around him, up on their chairs, staring down, and all of a sudden they start freaking out. "No, that was amazing! Oh my God, did you guys? It was so cool!" So what he does is he finds out who the coolest kid in school is. He goes, John Smith. He's the guy that everyone wants to be friends with. The girl all want to date him. Okay, John, I hear you're the guy. I'm going to pick on you during this show, but you guys want to see a close-up trick? Now, I'm not going to show this to many people, so be real quiet. And he gets quiet and low. And what that does is that forces the people who can't quite see to stand up, and then to stand up higher. And as you know, when you're performing for that age, it doesn't matter how good you are.
Yeah.
It's all about them and their reaction. They want their Instagram reaction that they saw from David Blaine and Christine. They want to scream and shout. So I was sitting there by the front door, and all of a sudden kids were walking in going, "Oh, we can't see. That's not fair." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." he just like, that's like a Jedi mind trick. I mean,
Yeah.
they've started walking in there saying, ooh, a magic show. And they went to, how come we can't see? He completely flipped the script on him. It was just
Right.
genius.
Wow.
And then his whole show, he breaks every rule of magic. Everything I'd ever learned about always be nice to your audience. Don't turn your back to the audience. Like, he calls a kid stupid. And you love him for it. He goes, where's John Smith? I hear he's really stupid. Now, this is the job that
Sure.
he's already told he's going to pick on. And all of the cool kids go, yeah, he's our friend. And all the other kids are like, poetic justice. John Smith finally gets this. Right? It's just brilliant. And he picks him up. And he's like, I got this intelligence ball. See, when I drop it, it only goes here. I'm not very smart. You do it. Boom. And it sticks to the ground. And he goes, "Here's what I'm working with." And and then at the end, he tells that he talks about bullying and how it's just amazing message.
Yeah.
And I will not, I've seen him now at high school twice. Both times I cried when he tells his stories.
Yeah.
I can't help it. It's so moving and it's such a beautiful story.
Yeah.
And I look around and there's not a dry eye. The whole house, all these high school kids who are too full for emotions are just like blubbering. And it's beautiful. And at the end, they're lined up to hug him. And it was like a religious experience. It was so good.
That's amazing. Yeah. I've only seen him work live on it was a lineup with a bunch of other performers. Every year there was a magic show that would do a little tour around several theaters in Maryland and Pennsylvania. And it was an elegant evening of comedy and magic. And there was a guy who put it together, R.G. Smith, producer from the area, again, the middle East Coast. And I would go every year, like it was part of our annual tradition because it was 20 minutes away in this theater in Frederick. And one year Bargatze was one of the people on the lineup, and just again, I mean, even just seeing him do 20 minutes or whatever it was, so funny, and then also telling his tale and just like so inspiring, and just a phenomenal, and what's really maddening, I clearly it's related, but like his son Nate Bargatze is one of my wife's and my favorite comedians now.
Hysterical.
And there's no question though, like I love the sort of I knew him when feel, because like, no, just because he's got a couple of Netflix specials now, like I knew that his family was funny back in the 90s because I saw his dad on stage do magic and comedy. And of course his son's gonna, like, if anything, I care less about Nate being funny because, well, yeah, you grew up in that household. How could you not be?
Yeah. If Stephen was my father, I'd be hysterical.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly how comedy works. It's 100% genetic. So, and there's no work involved,
My sister-in-law in Huntsville, Michelle, texted me. She goes, "Hey, the comedy club's got this magician coming. Have you ever heard of him? Should we see him?" And he's texted me a picture of Stephen. And I was like, absolutely go. Drop everything. Bring all the bring everyone you can. Yeah.
I'm
officially my family's second favorite magician.
Yeah.
They love me just a little less than they love Bargatze.
That was your fault. You could have told them just don't go. It's gonna waste.
I really
waste your time.
Yeah.
I have one more question for today, but again, we've got other stuff I want to touch on. Oh, I do want to tease something that maybe people can tune into later. It's not the craziest tease ever, but one of the things that I like about you, but also you're sort of known for among other colleagues in the area, is script writing and joke, infusing humor into your shows. And so I definitely want to talk more about that. But I feel like that's going to be a little bit of a longer chat. So I want to save that for next time. But do you have an example, without naming names? Can you give us an example of a show where you learned something negative, where the performer was doing something, or multiple things maybe, where it's been just as inspiring as Bargatze, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, like that made an impact on who you are and what you're doing in your show now, but in a definitely, I do not want to be like that, or I do not want to do that kind of a way. does anything come to mind if I'm asking
Oh
about that?
gosh, there's one that comes to mind, and I hesitate to say it because it's one of my magic heroes.
Yeah.
He was doing a show for a magic group, and he's dressed in this very ornate costume.
Okay.
And before the show, he's walking through past all these non-magicians. All these muggles are in line to go in and see the show,
Mhm.
and he's the headline act. And he comes through with his just ridiculous outfit, and I just see people laughing at him behind his back. They're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
"Oh, look at that guy," like. And I remember thinking, "Oh gosh, but don't you know how good he is?"
Yep.
And but you walk out like that, you're gonna get teased.
Yeah.
And I'm
That's
sure he
good.
doesn't care. I mean, he can, he'll
Sure.
cash his check and be a gazillionaire. But to me, that was one of those moments where it hit me as like, oh yeah, you should be relatable all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
And also the knowledge. I mean, we've talked about this briefly before, but like, I do believe that the show starts when you pull up in your car, like,
yeah,
especially if it's something like you and I have both done library shows in the past, or just any situation, less of a corporate gig and more of like family and community type things where, I know we don't do a lot of birthday party shows these days, but when we used to do those, you would pull up in your car and there might be 8 little faces all peeking out the window. And if you get out of the car and, put on your fake mustache and spit your chew into a spittoon, and they all see you doing that from the
right.
window, then that affects their experience.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and the other thing that comes to mind is there's multiple magicians that I could say this about, but the inability to read their audience.
Mm-hmm.
There are guys who want, I don't want to say too many details because this is a person that I very much care for. I like them
Sure.
as a human, but they were doing a show in part for me. Like I subcontracted a thing, and I asked them how it went, and they were, oh man, it was so great. And then I got this reaction, I got that reaction, I got this. And then I talked to the client,
Uh,
and it was the polar opposite. I mean, I heard
mm,
the same, oh yeah, I heard the same tricks. He's like, and when I did this, they said that. And they were like, oh yeah, he did this. And we were so embarrassed for him. Like
oh no. Uh,
that kind of stuff makes me really self-conscious because it's really, people will always tell you if you don't hear, oh, you're the best magician we've ever seen,
uh,
you're objectively bad. I mean, you hear that even if you're not that good,
agreed.
you hear that all the time, and you
Yeah.
just cannot let that get to your head. You
Yeah.
cannot believe it. I mean, it might be true to that person at that moment, but it doesn't mean that you can stop working.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Agreed.
so those are those. There are others, but I can't think of a way to tell you those stories without
Yeah.
saying who it is, and I'd rather not hurt people's feelings.
Oh
But
yeah. No. Well, and the only reason I mention it is because, for our friend listening with us here, like I would, that has the potential of being a takeaway as opposed to just,
sure.
I'm not trying to throw shade
Well,
and trash
I love
names.
I love to critique magicians. I love it, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I enjoy. I enjoy. So we went to a Ring 50 Magi World once, and there was a
Mhm.
magician who was a stage illusionist, and I was sitting next to Bob Sheets, one of my heroes and one of the guys I've learned the most from.
Uh-huh.
And he leans over and he whispers. He goes, "Oh, I get it. He's a cover band magician."
Right.
And that stuck with me. Like that was like, oh yeah, he is. And that learning that now I can see people as, oh yeah, this is another cover band. But he does all of the illusions that are popular in the last 5 years, and he
Right.
does
Right.
all of the music that you would expect a magician to use. And
Sure.
so yeah, I think there's something really valuable to going and seeing all magic shows, including bad magic shows. Although now that I have a
Yeah.
family, and I'm sure you relate to this, it's so much harder. When I was younger and less married and less kiddie,
Yeah.
I could do that every weekend. Any free day, I would go see a magic show. Now it's like,
Sure.
oh, I just want to go home and go to sleep.
Yeah, yeah, and also our mutual friend Jeff Uline, who is going to be
Awesome.
one of the guests on here.
Mhm.
He is my favorite person to take to a magic show
He's a
because
great,
not only is he knowledgeable, but he gets so grumpy if it is not going
yeah,
well, and I feel a little bit bad. Like it, I feel like Inside Out, where like he is able to emote part of what's going on in my head, and he is the able, and we can talk about that and our frustrations about it. So I think I think it's great.
Jeff Eline, Ray Cosby. There's a couple guys that I go to for like hardcore critique.
Yeah.
Jeff gave me some wonderful harsh critique of the first time he saw my show.
Nice.
He goes, yeah, I just thought you seemed like a real jerk for this part of the show.
Good. I mean, yeah.
And here's why.
That's the sign of a true friend.
Well, that's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear everything. And because the truth is, I try to ride the line between kind of jerky and I do that on purpose for character building.
Yeah.
But I need to hear when people think I've crossed the line into unlikable.
Sure.
And it was great. And I learned a lot, I took his critique, I wrote it down, and I thought about it for months. And in terms of how can I still keep my character and not cross that line?
Right.
And I think that since the next couple times he saw my show, I don't think he thought I was a jerk anymore. Good. Thank goodness. But I still have that edge and
yeah, no, it's important. You don't want to lose that perspective and point of view, but you also don't want to alienate people if you can help it. So yeah. Well, I think if people would like to buy a couple of tickets to a show where you're slightly less of a jerk than you used to be, then it is now much 30% more Jeff Eline approved. Then you can head on over to agoodliar.com. And then on all the Brian, on the social networks, Brian Curry Lies is your handle for that. And that is going to do it for this episode of the podcast of the impossible. But if you want to follow any of my stuff, if you're curious about sort of social media and other, random thing, public shows, that sort of thing, in my world, you can head on over to oftheimpossible.com. I'm Peter Wood. Thank you.